Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome on ArchiDiaries. We are back with another very interesting interview today in our online live interview series, which is titled as Reflections on Architecture and Design. In this interview series, we invite architects, interior designers, practitioners, researchers to get diverse viewpoints on practice as well as theory. I'm really glad to share that today we have with us a very eminent architect from Kerala, architect Vivek Puthenpurail. He is a co-founder and also a partner at Calicut. Vivek, welcome on ArchiDiaries.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining with us. So, has been doing some really wonderful projects in Kerala over the years. And so, before I hand it over to Vivek for his presentation, please allow me to introduce Dears and what their practice philosophy is all about. So, Dears is a community of people with common interests whose passion is in exploring happiness through design, architecture, and spatial responses. Their responses come from respecting relationships within and beyond the premises, nurturing values and deeper meanings. The Earth thrives to celebrate relationships through experiential spaces, evoking senses and emotions. They believe in co living with nature in each and every moment, exploring their responses to the elements earth, water, fire, air, and space. They believe that the journey in architecture becomes worthwhile as we extend the purpose beyond each project to the overall well being of the community and the larger good of humanity. I would like to invite Vivek to share his work, and the dais is all yours. Thank you, Vivek. Over to you.
Thank you, Ayas, and thank you for that kind introduction. And I think half of my work is done because you have already explained our philosophy quite well. I'll just share my screen.
Yeah.
Clear, right?
Yeah, clear.
Good morning, everybody. And thank you, ArchiDiaries, for this opportunity. And what I would like to take you through is a quick journey of our architecture, mainly residential architecture. We focus on some of our recently completed projects. And we have called it Crafting Soulful Spaces, a Journey Beyond Architecture. So, Dear Ayas has beautifully introduced us. We are a practice which is now in our 18th year, and we have been learning every day, growing through our projects. So we are much better students now, but we have been trying to do whatever best we can in terms of residential architecture. We have ventured into public architecture. We have ventured into socially responsible architecture, and have been doing projects all over South right now. We are a group of 24 people in Calicut. We have one office in Calicut. And we believe our team is our strength. And we celebrate each moment in our office. And we take that celebration into a side. And there's a lot of teamwork with our co-office mates and also with the clients, with the craftsmen, with the contractors, and it's a collective effort. Whatever project that we do is a collective effort between all of us, and that is why introducing our team, introducing our culture is equally important to introducing our projects as well. This is where we work right now, an office right in the Calicut city, but we think this kind of an atmosphere gives us the right creative feel to nurture our designs. We do a lot of activities in terms of understanding our context, understanding our traditions, understanding our biodiversity. So that's why I'm saying we keep learning, and that is the fundamental of our practice. That it is a research-oriented practice. It's a learning-based practice. And there is something to learn on every single day, from every single context, from every single plant, from every single architecture that is in front of us, from the lives, from every single conversation. And that is something that takes us forward every time. So basically our practice is in search of a balance, balancing the philosophy that we are talking about, understanding the context and the content. Like context is something that is very immediate, maybe a larger context in terms of district or a region, and much larger context, which is our Earth itself, and trying to develop a content out of that context, understanding a kind of a narration, because which is very important. It is not just a physical architecture. We believe that architecture is not a physical object. So there is something called culture, and we strive to nurture in every single project. So it's about how we develop that narrative in each project. And basically, it's also about the representations that we do and how do we understand those context and narrations to a beautiful design process, and also the craft and traditions, and how we understand what we call ourselves the soulful experience in celebrations. So basically, the philosophy, I just try to read through this, because this is what drives us every day. What a blessing it's been to have been born in this beautiful earth, to live among the plants, creepers, trees, shrubs, flowers, dogs, cows, and more. We have a little family where we love and be loved, rooted to culture. Our memories guide us ahead. We take pride in our history and heritage. Relationship nurture, we find our co-travelers in life. Context build our identity, and each journey is so unique and exciting, it needs to be respected. We need to be celebrated. There's so much around us to engage with and explore. Each one has its own music. Create us to imbibe all this and extend the being. Let those be timeless, enrich and inspire for generations to come, and let us belong to it. And this whole narrative is the fundamental of our tagline, which is nature, create, belong, where we are only reasons to build something. We don't strive to be different. We are not striving to create an architecture which is different from others. We are striving to create an architecture which is meaningful to that particular place, to particular time, particular client. And so finally, that architect, the clients belong to that architect, that space, and that space should belong to that context. And this idea takes us forward every single day. This is something Ayaz have beautifully explained, that we are a community of people. It's not about myself or Nishan. It's about all of us together working towards a common goal. And ultimate goal is finding happiness on every day, in every task, every journey. But through that, we try to contribute to every single client, to the context, to the earth, and to the society in whatever way we can. This is also something I already told you. We were founded in 2004. So basically, talking about the context, the first question is, how do you relate your project brief to context? How do you immerse in the context that's being a part of it? Basically, for us, the project brief is not a set of numbers. It is a long conversation between the client and us, and to understand who's the client and what the family, how he has been and how the family has been, what is the culture, what are their aspirations, what are the daily habits, and there are a lot of things like what do they like to do. So this conversation takes us, to bring us very closer to that family, or to bring us very closer to that project. And when we agree to take up an assignment, we're not just signing an agreement, but then we are also sharing the dreams, ideas, concerns, habits, potentials, and limitations of our client, especially the limitations too. So we nurture as it is ours. Like we should understand that we are only facilitators as architects. So it is all about the client, and we are trying to modulate something which would make their life better from here. So we should take both the potential and limitations there. And being sensible to the actual need of the client was one of the most important things. Like an idea of developing a meaningful brief is equally or more important than developing the design itself. This process of developing the brief is something we spend a lot of time, and that is the foundation of our design process. Yeah. So I'm just taking you to a few examples because I don't want to take you to a theoretical presentation today. And I don't want to talk more. I'll take just 20-25 minutes more, but I'll rush through some of the images. This particular project in Chennai is in between a concrete jungle, and we were given this beautiful rectangle site in between this concrete jungle, and we were trying to understand how do we bring this philosophy, how do we bring this closeness to nature, how do we bring this and family connectivity, the social culture of that between the built forms in such a space. And then we came up with this idea of a large central courtyard, which is a very linear courtyard, and 2 built blocks on either side of it. And that is how the whole project is designed. And there are 3 floors on 2 built forms, and which is connected by a wooden bridge. And this large courtyard, every single room actually looks into the large courtyard, this large courtyard, and this is more or like an inward-looking design. And that connects the entire life between the family. There is a dog, so between the family and the dog, the kids going around, the women of the house is right there in the courtyard because the kitchen is in the courtyard, so she can see the entire place. When somebody comes in, there is enough privacy, but there is a formal living room on the other side. And we also made sure there is an overall texture that we wanted to bring in, which is much more an earthy texture, which will just stand apart in that whole context of painted concrete buildings. And this is how the entire section looked at. So we layered the experiences from the thresholds to transition, like from the entry point from the road, there is a level of transition that we took through the landscape, through this pollinated veranda to a semi-formal space, then this courtyard and a very private space inside. And what we achieved is something very satisfying because to achieve this kind of greenery, to achieve the kind of earthiness, to achieve this kind of livable, soulful space within a city, in the center of a metro city like Chennai, was something very satisfying for us. And again, it takes a lot of effort, hands-on on site, to achieve something like this. We have tried to bring in a lot of values of memories of traditional architecture here. Because the clients are from Kerala, there are a lot of these nuances of Kerala architecture being brought in a very contemporary level. And we design end-to-end, like each furniture, lighting, each features have been carefully curated into the space. This is this dining space which just opened up completely to the landscape around. And even in the hot Chennai afternoon, I'm very, very happy when clients call us and say that they don't have to switch on the AC, but they just can dine in the garden in the city. This is the experience when you look in the evening. They just open out and the lighting, the tropical landscape, and the puja room, which is facing straight, gives it a very divine elements to that space. And there are when you light it inside, there is this light coming through those jali, which brighten up the space. Again, this is the view from the courtyard. And there are a lot of the small sitting spaces which nurture different activities in the courtyard. You can see these windows from the bedrooms. They can read it in the read books from those bay window looking at this courtyard. And there are multiple terraces, and all these terraces are connected to either the gym and the home theater, the bedroom. And this terraces also becomes a screening for the light, for the heat, and also for the vision from the other neighboring apartments. So this is not just for the visual element, but it plays a very important role in the life and the microclimate of the house. This is the entry. You can see the column right in the front. So there is an extension of Tamil culture as well. And when it closed in, it's a very different thing. So you can see how the kitchen is also open to the central courtyard, and the whole thing becomes a narrative in the landscape. Another project that we want to showcase today is Vibes Talasheri. Another recently coming project. This came up in a very linear 10 site, just neighboring the parents' home, and this belonged to Shamir and Sharmini, who are from Middle East, working in the Middle East, and they wanted something very soulful when they come India, which is an extension of the traditions, Muslim family traditions, but yet has a lot of this contemporary element. The whole process of making this house was enjoyable because client was equally passionate as us, and we traveled and we tried to pick each and every element from different places and try to repurpose it for putting it together as one single story in the house. And that narrative become very powerful because it does become a house of memories. And though their family, parents' house on the left is there, we wanted to create a private space for them. So there is a large living dining, again on the 1.5 height, which opens up into a courtyard on both sides. And two courtyards of very different quality. And we get very different kind of a lighting from morning till night. And that makes it a very living, it's a living house. And there are so many little nuances that we have added on sitting bay windows, on climbing up the stairs, climbing up a ladder to the kids' bedroom. There's a swimming pool. There's a kotil, like in the traditional Muslim house. There is a kotil where you can sit, where you can lie down, where you can sit as a group. There is a veranda which is colonnaded. There is a large sit out. So that a lot of these small elements which came through the discussions with the clients. And we have built a story out of it, and that story actually translated into spaces. And again, since it is Talasheri, North Malabar, we used laterite as a major element of the site. And wherever we go, like in Chennai, we try to understand what is the local material there. In Hyderabad, we understand local material. We're doing the census in Bangalore. We're doing a lot of local students available in Bangalore. And this is the result. Like there is it's a plain background because we have not used paints in the walls. It's plastered, polished plastering, just plastering and details over it. And then the whole space extends to the landscape on other sides. And there are a lot of used woods, very silent lighting, furniture being curated. This is the view of the swimming pool, the deck on the other side. The pool is over the dining, and then you overlook the courtyard down. And this array of windows also gives this large openness to the outside and also lightens the whole form. And it doesn't look like a big concrete form standing in the space. Each and every element, from lighting to dining to kitchen to breakfast table, were carefully curated, crafted into something very unique to that site. So you can see how we have repurposed this old traditional landscape, handrails, and also this wood into something very contemporary in terms of the staircases. We use tiles. Most of our roofing comes with steel and roof tiles, but then this helps us to reduce heat in our spaces, but also helps us to play with a lot of light inside the spaces. We have used a lot of natural finishes in this design. Basically, this particular bedroom is of blue oxide, and you can see how this contemporary furniture very nicely fit into that space. With the plastered background, blue oxide, a landscape area, old wood being repurposed. Quite the kind of space which will relate to one's heart. These are small details that we have tried to do in terms of those staircases where outside the wood, repurposed wood. The courtyard also is very organic, very tropical. And we also tried to repurpose this columns. And this is the kotil that I was talking about, a very informal space which just flows into the floor. And whenever we go to the house, I think this is the space where we spend most of the time. Yeah. And verandas, for us, verandas is not just an entry, it's also a threshold of that space. And it's more like an extended living. And you hear the sound of a small water body there, and there is this tropical garden behind it. So even before entering into the living room, you spend a lot of time in these verandas, and that becomes as part of the house. And Swasti Talasheri, another project, is something that we are doing right now, and it's very close to our heart. Again, talks about how we can contribute to a larger context. So this is a traditional context. We are a large temple in Talasheri, Tirumala temple. So we are trying to understand the whole rootscape of that place and how our small resident probably can be an extension of the contextual qualities that the whole area had. And we try to relate it to the micro context, to the macro context, understand how we can relate. And instead of talking about a plan and elevation, we talked about how spaces can relate to all the four sides and how beautifully the space can just merge into the landscape there. And the result was an architecture which doesn't have a face, but it just merges into the landscapes in all sides, and also modulated the levels accordingly. So these are the type of drawings that we work on, which will help us to understand how we have modulated the levels between the landscapes, how the furniture sits there, what are the qualities of furniture, how we can play with the light, what are the privacies that we need to generate, what are the different qualities for different courtyards. And all this kind of drawings helps us to create more life within our spaces. Like, it's not just about creating greenery around; it's about understanding how the spaces will relate to our daily life. Like the breakfast courtyard in the east courtyard, more like a party courtyard on the west, and this extension of living space and the study space towards south, towards north, and there's this little bay window where there's a library bookshelf looking towards the west, when they can come in after both the doctors, they can come in from hospital, spend some good quality time during the late evenings. And you can see this peep window looking into the living room. So there are so many little details which talks about how we relate to the context and how we relate to the culture of our clients. We also have ventured into the public realm. Like a lot of those projects, consortium with Space Art, Tuai, DAC, and a lot of those offices, especially now in our collaboration with the IA Calicut Center, where I'm a very critical part of right now, the chairman. We try to contribute in whatever we can to the public space. And this is one of those projects which is very close to our heart, which is the Freedom Square in Calicut. And this came up as a design of a stage for us, and from our MLA, Sri Pradeep Kumar. And when we discussed with the visionary MLA, took this idea beyond and say that this has to be a memorial for the freedom struggle. This was a salt satyagraha which happened on the beach, and thus it became a gallery of the street, of the heritage, with stages on both sides. And it became an identity. We worked with that kind of a scale where it became an identity for the city, and where people can come in, people can understand the heritage of the place, and also say that I am here in Calicut. And so this is the sculpture that we worked on ourselves by our graphic artist Yedu did it. And this shows the kind of struggle that happened in the place. And the whole thing stands on the beach like a sculpture when it is not used. And when it is getting used, it has multiple uses right from the morning to evening. And when it is events, just take another shape. It just becomes a silent background for any event to take place on it. And there are this history relics being inscribed on the walls in the center. So once you walk through the center spine, you get an idea about the rich history of Calicut. And we also have done the space nearby, which is the cultural beach, along with Space Art Calicut for tourism. So this whole area becomes a great background for arts, cultural performances, activities. And in the night, it just takes us a monumental and sculpturistic monumental scale with the special lighting that it has. And it becomes a background for the people just to relax and sit when it's not there. For activities like ALF, the space just takes another shape. It's vibrant, it's well lit, where lakhs and lakhs of people can come in and enjoy in this kind of a space. So you can see this both stages on two different sides, and the central spine takes an extension to the beach, like the old sea beaches, ones where the economical hotspots of Calicut. And most of our projects are a repository of memories. We try to build in a lot of traditional crafts and traditional proportions in our projects. And that becomes part and parcel, of our narrative. This is one such pure traditional project, which was like a renovation. It was a rental house. We remodeled into another house for a Muslim family. And there were a lot of this little nuances, culture, religion that we tried to brought in. The house actually was not exposed to laterite. We took off the plastering and let the laterite show us real glory, and also change the face. So these are the courtyards that we worked on. Instead of cladding over the wall, we just took off the plaster and let the laterite, show be in itself. And we also tried to add a lot of minute contemporary details over it. And there are a lot of the little elements of furniture and elements like this little water tumbler there, and a lot of these projects also help us to bring back the memories of old good times. This is another project, again a little traditional, again in the city of Calicut, but you can see how this working with traditional architecture help us to understand these proportions and how this proportion is connected to the soul, how this proportion is connected to the connected to the families and our lifestyle, our climates, weather, uh, and the overall context. So these are projects which help us to develop our own kind of architecture language. At times we work on very pure traditional, but at times we try to get inspired from this and work on with the narrative, which helps us to bring it, link traditional, connect traditional with the contemporary designs and living aspects. We also try to repurpose the old windows. This is one of those repurposed bay window in a project in Calicut. You can see the old Belgium glass. And when you do such things, it brings in another kind of an experience within the space. And again, these are repurposed windows, which becomes a piece of art. So when you bring in art and craft, there's a lot of art and art being coming into our spaces, and there is little differences between art, architecture, biodiversity. So everything becomes a very soulful experience together. We also try to work with a lot on the elements of earth, the water, air, lights. Harvesting the water through different modulation of our old kulam or our old traditional tanks is something we keep exploring. You can see one of our projects where we repurposed the old urinal into a water body. These are stone urinals seen in these old palaces in Kerala. And the another project on the right is about rainwater housing, and see how the rain is coming and getting collected to that little pond and then just percolates into the landscape. And this particular project is just below my plots besides my office, and it is right in the center of the city. But we let that compound non-paved so that when it rains, there is smell of that pretty soil, that smell of that new soil. And that is something that we have been missing in our new narrative of completely paved, cement paved compounds. And our children is left with no mud to play. And I'm happy when the clients say that they play a lot of cricket during then, they celebrate the rain. So instead of fearing about the rain, I think it's very important that architecture celebrates the rain like this, and create opportunities for people to enjoy the rain within the house itself. This is a little veranda where you can just sit there on that seater and enjoy the rain as it does. We also create other opportunities for enjoying the landscape around. This is a stargazing space on a terrace on one of our projects in Calicut. And there are other projects which celebrates the earth as it is, like multiple terraces, which recreates the lost earth or in the same house itself. And you can see how we have used the coconut trunks for constructing the whole wall. This is Nishan's house, meanwhile, and it is really beautiful when we try to celebrate fire, when we try to lit the house, and this understanding of bringing that divine quality to the space is not just about the religious quality. It is about respecting the space, respecting the materials, and respecting the earth. And this narrative becomes very interesting during the dawn. And when you enter that space, then you have this feeling of going into some other, you have this feeling of belonging to somewhere. And this is the same project in Calicut where I show you the tank of earlier, and you can see how rain celebrates the whole environment, the whole landscape and structure there, and everything just becomes a background. The architecture just becomes a silent background while the nature takes over. And through this, what we try to do is to develop a living ecosystem. It's not architecture as an object, but what we are trying is to blur boundaries between the built and the unbuilt. So it's a living ecosystem, and the ecosystem consists of these front yards, courtyards, where the entire space walks to the courtyards. So people talks about birds who come and put the nest in the courtyards. Birds who come and wake them up every morning. The butterfly, the range of butterflies that they see there, squirrels that they come here. And I think that then that is what makes a house a real home on the earth. And that is what we strive to do every time, connecting not just visually into the landscape, but connecting the life into the landscape and blurring the boundaries and making a living ecosystem around our houses. So wherever possible, we try to add these elements of nature, add these elements of biodiversity, water bodies, the light, the materials of nature to make sure it connects to our daily life. You can see this is a morning breakfast table where, from the kitchen, it just opens out to this courtyard and they can have this cup of tea, reading a newspaper right at the courtyard. And you just extend your living beyond the space, and we try to build in a very natural tropical landscape around the houses to ensure that whatever comes as a result not just contributes to the clients but also contributes to the context. This is the house that we were talking about the stargazing and how that veranda looks towards the large farm area. And this also helped us to look beyond our residences to other projects like this tribal development project, which we had a master plan of 25 acres. And the whole plan very blended into the landscape that is there. And how do we actually do it? It is about capturing this narratives of the context, capturing this collective brief of the client, the cultural brief of the client, the aspirational brief of the client, into something that would help us conceptualize an ecosystem and truly discover the sense of belonging. So how do we discover the sense of belonging is something that we keep exploring. And this negotiation of existing resources happened through a series of sketches, a series of models, which helps us to build and slowly train the relationship of the build and unbuilt of the house. So this particular house is in Calicut, Mukab, and you can see how we are trying to develop this through a series of drawings. And the drawings helps us to understand how the landscape is going to the house and what is the kind of modulations that we should bring into the whole build form to make sure the build form just sits there in the landscape. So there are a series of sketches that myself, Nishan, and all our teammates do to understand how a build should sit silently into the landscape and be a part of those biodiversity later. Those are layers of sketches that comes from an understanding of the brief and understanding of the context, and this just extends that kind of experiences in sketches itself. You can see this, the whole landscape, it's a large house, but then it exists there on the landscape and in the narrative, like Jeffrey Baba's sketches, where we're growing and we're learning from our sketches all over through our education and ever beyond. And you can see there is no difference between the architecture and the landscape in those sketches. It is of equal importance. The architecture landscape is not an afterthought. The paving is not an afterthought. Biodiversity is not an afterthought. It is being thought about together to make sure it is one single element. And this kind of sketches help us to understand that we are not talking about a landscape which to make our architecture beautiful, but we are talking about an architecture which would enrich the landscape around. And all this kind of sketches help us to come up with a narrative which is very close to the biodiversity. And we do celebrate every moment. We believe that there has to be a natural aging process where we age gracefully with the landscape, where we stand the test of time and create timeless architecture. So whatever we do, we try to work a lot on site hands-on. These are the painted walls. These painted walls were from our office. We work there on the site and try to build that character of art on the streets. This is a small bus stop that we are designing in the Medical College Calicut for IA Calicut Center. And these are things that we enjoy doing it on site. And this is another 5 lakh machines done for a cancer survivor in Talasheri. And this project is very close to our heart. And there are a lot of hands-on things that we could do on the site. And we are very, very happy when our such attempts are just owned up by the client later. And when we went there after a couple of 2-3 years, this was how it was. The house just taken over by the landscape, and they were living happily there. And there are other projects where we just go there and work with the client. There's another 4.5 lakh listings where the whole team was there to lay the roof on the structure. and also to understand how these elements are being worked on the site. And we enjoy those processes. And one of those projects, again, Tribal Village was one of those projects where we were very closely working with stakeholders on the site. And though it's a partial success and partial failure, which will take another presentation to talk about, we are happy that at least 9 families actually came up and actually living very, very happy in the residence area. So, dear, as we began, it's a collective effort. It's not about persons. And as we said, as Ayaz rightly said, we find happiness every moment, every day, in every task. Along the journey, celebrating our work and our relationship, and that is what is very important. And we believe that what drives us is that we believe we have a purpose, and we extend that purpose beyond each project to the overall well-being of the community and the larger good of the community. So, in search of a balance, I'd like to conclude. We believe that there has to be a very immersive process in the architecture, like the professional, personal, community, humanity, nature, climate, all has to become part of a concept. We believe we have to be very, very critical about the pedagogy, about whatever we learned. There has to be a lot of unlearning that has to happen. About the system, so-called systems, we have to question the system, we have to question the procedures, we have to question the traditions, not just repeat them, but question and probably imbibe the qualities from them. We have to question the theories. We have to be inclusive for landscape, not just about the people, but the landscape, culture, biodiversity, social health, and well-being. And finally, it's not about being different or trying to put my stamp on people, but it's about understanding that we are a part of a larger community, family, friends, state, nation, religion, world. It's like let us say that we are all one, and with that kind of an understanding, there is a beginning of another concept which will make our architecture, which will make our space very timeless and very belonging and very soul. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vivek. I think you should just continue. There is no need for a discussion, I believe. I think the discussion is there are so many things. I would like to request you to stop sharing your screen so that we can see you again. No, I was so much into your presentation, and I almost sort of get aside that, okay, we are going to have a discussion on this, because it's complete in itself, just like your work. You said the inside, outside, the culture, tradition, and the contemporary ways. So, and one thing that you said, I think towards the end of the presentation, celebrating the rain. Okay, now that is something that one can see in almost all the projects, whether it is that 4 lakh or the tribal village, or it is the villas, the residences that we've done. And also, if we come across a lot of projects from the Kerala, but perhaps these were the photographs where we could actually see the rain in the photographs. Yeah. So that speaks a lot about how the overall, starting from the form of the house to all the way up to the details, how the water is present in the drawing itself. So that was something that was wonderful to see in your work. And you also mentioned about Geoffrey Bawa, and he's sort of coined a very famous term about tropical modernism. And this is sort of I believe, is kind of an apt demonstration of what that tropical modernism can be, what one of the expression is all about. So the one thing which, if I were to say that, and also it is the search to find a contemporary sort of expression for an architecture that is also rooted in the context of Kerala. So particularly, so if I look at the context, let's say there's a climate, there's a tropical climate, rain, there's a cultural, the landscape. And so if I try to sort of decode this sort of tropical modernism that is there in your work, but the broad elements, for example, one is of course the climate and the ecology. that you, towards the end, actually, you showed very nice sketches where you're trying to sort of say that the building and the landscape have become one, where you cannot even actually, you cannot even trace the boundary of where the building stops and the open spaces, or the inside and the outside, the start. So one is, of course, the climate in the land. What is it that from the cultural front? So when I see a lot of your projects, of course, there is a contemporary sort of an outlook, but there is also a lot of use of some of the traditional elements like the columns, some of the floral patterns, the tiles that you see use in many of your projects. So there are certain kinds of doors, the roofs with certain kinds of details. So how do you see this combination of, on one hand, something we are using materials like concrete, which is the outcome is totally a contemporary expression, and on the other hand, you are also using, I'm talking about the architectural sort of that elements which are taken from the vernacular. So how do you see this whole process of mixing these two? What are the broad sort of characteristic that you're trying to go after in that case?
As if I understand the question, right? It's about connecting the modernism with the cultural aspects of architecture that we are talking about.
Yeah.
So that is where the very initial aspect of our process, which I told, is very important. It is about knowing the client and knowing the context. And when you start say that we are knowing the client, I've already told it's not about number of bedrooms. It's not about the square feet they need. It's not about the kitchen, the type of kitchen they need. It's not about the number of toilets.
Yeah.
It's not about the number. It's about where do they want to sleep. It's about how do they want to dine.
Right.
It's about how do they want to cook.
Right.
And the moment you ask these questions, there is culture coming in there. Because the way we dine in Kerala is not the way the people dine in Tamil Nadu, where people dine in, Hyderabad. So there are a lot of differences in who cooks, and what is the relationship between the kitchen and the place, and how does that bring in an equity of gender in the architecture. So there are a lot of things which suddenly come in.
Right.
And it's not about repeating what the traditions would have made as mistake in architecture. And in your traditional architecture, you see a lot of the separation of spaces.
Right.
Right from caste separations to gender separations. It's about understanding what those spaces had in terms of quality and trying to bring it into a new narrative which would bring in equity to the space. So when we talk about culture, it is not about copy-pasting the culture, but extending the culture, towards the next generation. So when we talk about, when we say that we are done at space, the clients are happy because at least their kids to get to know what were the quality aspects of this culture.
Absolutely.
In terms of spatial relationships.
Right.
Then comes the symbols. There are many symbols which are related to the culture. There are religious symbols. There are when you go into say a Malabar residence, a Hindu Malabar residence is very different from a Muslim Malabar residence. A Muslim Malabar residence is very different from a Muslim Travancore residence. So there are a lot of the symbols which came from traditions of craft, the availability of materials, and a lot of other aspects.
Yes.
And this kind of memories will connect their grandfather, their past to the next future generations. And we try to understand this kind of symbols out of it. We take elements out of it and try to bring into a very contemporary. It may be lighting, it may be wooden work, it may be elements on the wall,
yes,
it may be elements on the furniture. And suddenly, when you talk about this, then there are a lot of stories to tell about the house.
Yeah, true.
It is not just about just one space. It is about going to the space and see that this wood is from there, and this craft. They used to come from Arabia and make this little thing. They used to come from North India. The craftsmen used to come from Thoothukudi. There are a lot of little stories which would connect this craft into in the house. So aspects of inbuilding culture into our space come from the deep conversations that we have with the client and the whole society.
Right.
We keep doing that. And sometimes it is very difficult to get from a client because they may not be that vocal as that we think of. Then we have to be with them for a longer time. Probably we have to go see their residence where they are residing now, or probably conceive a certain kind of an idea from the overall neighborhood. There are certain other means of doing it. But it helps us because this makes our design very different when we do it in Malabar.
Right.
When we do it in South Kerala, it is very different.
Right.
We have done residences in Tirupur and Chennai, it is very different. Tirupur house is actually totally different. We have done presence in Hyderabad, it is very different because the whole idea of culture is different there. The idea of architecture, the spatial transition, spatial hierarchy is different.
Yeah.
When we do it in Bangalore for our poor clients, it is very different.
True.
Again, the quality of spaces, the spatial aspirations is different. So being contextual is not about being extending Kerala to the whole of India, but understanding the context wherever it is.
Absolutely.
And that is what that is the kind of idea that you get from this building narrations from a context. That the representations will give us an idea to decode any of the context.
And this is what actually you said the brief does, right? You said that, and that is normally, not the kind of a practice. You said a wonderful thing that for every project, there is a brief that you sort of come up with. And in that brief, one, there is the interaction with the client and the research. And so it brings out what is it that they want, what is the history, what is the cultural, what is the tradition which is still alive in their lifestyle on one hand. And on the other hand, going out of the context, as we've been saying, and saying, okay, this is the issues that we are addressing in this house. And in the what is the larger context? And that sort of helps you sort of come up with that brief, which sort of becomes the kickstart of the project. So it's a wonderful process. I also really like.
I'll just add one point.
Yeah.
The difference there is our brief are not often bulleted points. Our brief is almost a story.
Yeah.
It becomes a paragraph or it becomes 2 or 3 pages of story because it's that kind of when you write actually about what you have conceived.
Yeah.
Then it takes the quality of life already there. Whatever we want to achieve comes in the writing, the element of writing itself.
Yeah.
So when it is a bullet, it is just targeted. Like, you achieve that bullet, it is done. But when it is in a paragraph, it is not about one word, one element. It is about the wholesome experience.
And it's about the story. It's about the narration.
It's about the narration.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think I would love to see this stories, and it will be wonderful because writing the brief, and this is I believe also because coming from the academics, a little bit of experience that I've been having, the brief is actually a very important sort of I consider for any project is a very important how you conceive it, how you write it, what all you include it, and that plays a major role in the final outcome of. And also the design process. So it was wonderful. One point, maybe we're deviating also is when you look at these houses, the residents, most of the time people sort of make blocks and then leave margins on all sides, which most of the time, sort of become useless as kind of margins, which nothing you can do. Whereas if you can start bringing those pieces inside, instead of house becoming an object, if it becomes sort of an inward looking, place, I think then it makes it much, those open spaces, which are otherwise, I think about 50-60% of the plots, in fact, more than that is usually the open spaces in residential sales. So in many of your residences, particularly when you bring those open spaces inside, I think that is what it does the trick and starts blending the boundary between the inside and the outside, isn't it?
Yeah. I would totally agree with that because what happens is there is something like a rule book, a building rule book for different destinations, for different Kerala there is a rule book, for other states there are relevant rule books there, for cities that are very specific. And there is Somebody have written about a setback, and that is what you call a margin. Sunway is not about you have to build your house up to 3 meters from the road, 1 meter on the either side, 2 meter on the other side, on some logic.
Yeah.
Yeah. The moment you understand that it is not a rule to follow as it is, but it's a guideline to make sure there is some kind of a relationship to the neighborhood, your problem ends there. Okay, so it is not about this margin. It's about some guidelines which you need to incorporate.
Yeah.
And moment you understand that you're not just designing a built environment or a built block in the site, but you are designing the entire site.
The whole thing.
Yeah, the whole thing. Your problem number 2 ends there. The third one is about whether it is inward looking or whether it is outward looking. And that is a contextual decision.
Yeah.
Because with whatever we do, we want to make sure our living environment within is good. And our response to the 4 sides of a neighborhood is also good.
Yeah.
To the street, to our neighbor on the rear side. Architecture doesn't make sense if you make beautiful elevations and put a big chunk of concrete and a large wall on your neighboring wall right there.
With the pipes going
with the pipes going on base and everything like this. So in the Chennai residence, we have taken some conscious decisions on how this inward looking thing would be. And wherever the neighbor had this high tall walls, and we have also put the tall walls because there is no relation. That space is already there.
Yeah.
So you have to make these decisions very contextually, whether to build high, whether to build low, how to relate to the neighborhood, and how to look inwards, and how to actually contribute within and within and outside place is something very important.
Yeah. Well, you showed actually 3 different kinds of. One was the residences. The second was the urban scale. There are also the 4 lakh residents.
The social responsibility.
Social responsibility. And these are all, I think, various facets, and there is sort of, one can see that there's a binding sort of a narrative. I was actually going through your website, and there's a lot of commercial sort of vertical extrusion projects are also going in cities where the land is becoming precious now, and you have no choice but to go vertical. Now, how do you sort of bring these aspects into the sections and the placemaking of all these things into when you're trying to go vertical?
Well, that's a very, very good question I asked. I think that takes another presentation to explain what are the possibilities, because whatever we have tried in one of the high rises that we have done in Calicut is to make sure that there is an integration of landscape in every floor, not just visually but experientially. So it's not about one planter, it's about extension of vegetable garden. And I was very happy driving through that place month before where I saw papaya tree on the 12th floor and a plantain on the 11th floor. So there is an extension of landscape, extension of usable landscape, not just beautiful landscape.
Yeah.
Extension of usable landscape right in the neighborhood. Next thing that we do is to make sure there are opportunities for social encounters. There are opportunities for social relationship. There are opportunities to meet and greet. And it is not about isolation on those towers. We have to make sure people just don't come out of the door, get in the lift, go to the basement, get to the car, go to the office, come back to the basement, go to the lift, go to the door again. So you just don't know your neighbor, you just don't know who is staying below us or above us in the tower. So there has to be, the way we design the common spaces in the towers, especially in residential towers, is very important to make sure there is a lot of social life, unknowingly generated. They wouldn't have time, but we should create opportunities to do that. Social relationship between men who go work, between women who go to work, between women who stay back, between the old senior citizens of that residences, the kids of that residences, and how to actually make all this evolve into a kind of a vertical village kind of an atmosphere. Yeah. Something that we would always want to explore. We would keep exploring in a high-rise project. There are multiple challenges for every project there.
Yeah.
There may, for a budget residence, it may not be for a budget apartment may not be able to do a lot of this terrace gardens and social spaces, but then there will be some kind of a narrative which will make sure there is relationship to the nature, there is a common space, there is a relationship between the people who resides there, and this kind of efforts are required to make to ensure that there is a quality life wherever we live in this world.
Yeah,
so whether in the city or whether in the village.
Very true, because the kind of apartment schemes that we see coming up, you rightly said, you get out of your door, your door, and you are next to the lift, and because the kind of qualities, I can almost imagine the towers that we are talking about. If we start approaching it in a way where we are integrating the nature, where we are integrating some common spaces where the chance encounters are possible, of knowing at least who's staying next to me or above me or below me, that could be actually much more beneficial to society as a whole.
Absolutely.
In the cities, I think that
absolutely
wonderful. I think, Vivek, I can go on talking to you
I think
forever.
It's good. Even for the viewers, it's good. 1 hour is a lot. I think we stopped right at right at the time. Even the presentation was 40 minutes. I think it was 37. We thought, I wanted to do it in 30, but it took 37.
It was wonderful, Vivek. Thank you so much for giving us your time, and I really enjoyed, and I'm sure the viewers have also enjoyed your work and the interaction that we have had. I hope and I wish that again sometime we will get a chance to interact and continue our conversation on.
Sure.
Thank you so much, and let me conclude here by thanking all the people who joined with us on various platforms. Thank you for joining with us on ArchiDiaries. We will be having one more interview next Saturday with Kamalika Bose. So please don't forget to join next Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.